The first big breakthrough at COP22, and it was presented by the Chinese. The program is tagged the Southern Climate Partnership Incubator. In effect, China is to help countries in the South cope with climate change and to meet the targets for cutting CO2 emissions set by the Paris Agreement.
China will cooperate with developing countries to set up 10 model areas for low carbon, establish 100 carbon reduction projects, provide training to 1,000 people. This is under the special climate change cooperative project called 10-100,000.
The United Nations has welcomed the initiative.
When China's flagship program, the South-South Cooperation Fund, is expanding the capacities of more developing countries to engage in this kind of collaboration.
The need in Africa has never been greater. The UN reckons climate-related troubles cost the continent around $200 billion annually. Droughts are becoming more frequent. The UN says just this year, El Niño affected the food security of more than 30 million people. Many countries also don't have the resources to meet the Paris Agreement targets.
The special needs of most vulnerable countries have to assume a more prominent space in all climate change forums, including on climate finance. Studies have shown that the national greenhouse gas emissions are often used as the basis for mitigation potential, and thus guide financing or funding decisions. In our view, this approach is inadequate.
China's President Xi Jinping last year pledged to set aside $3 billion to a fund for South-to-South cooperation on climate change. The latest initiative builds on that cooperation. It will start this year, and by 2025, more than 20 countries are scheduled to benefit.
Well, let's go live now to Morocco for the very latest on what's happening at the COP22 conference in Marrakech. Peninah Karibe is live on the ground for us. Peninah, of course, seems like it's been a rather eventful day today. Just take us through Monday's highlights.
Well, Linda, of course, that launch of the Global South Cooperation Initiative was really one of the main day's highlights because it really put on the spotlight the several initiatives and challenges faced by developing countries in their efforts to build climate resilience. Now, apart from that, of course, we also had education very much a focal point, and delegates basically discussing how education can be used to accelerate the implementation of the Paris Agreement and Sustainable Development Goals. Now, when we came for this summit, Lindy, the COP officials were very keen to indicate that this will be a COP of action. But now, 1 week down the line, we're hearing from some delegates saying they've got doubts about that, mainly from African countries. Earlier, they did hold a press briefing, and Dan Williams went there. Let's take a listen to what they said.
Preparing for the arrival of some 50 world leaders. Organisers of COP22 were gearing up for the high-level segment that aims to define the conference. But some here believe the summit has so far come up short of expectations.
The problem, we believe that we could have made greater strides than what we have accomplished in the past week. So developed countries have to ratchet up, have to show that they're really implementing what they've agreed to do. You know, we need to see developed countries put their money where their mouth is. They've been making promises which unfortunately have not materialized at times.
The least developed countries group is calling for clarity and urgency on the agreed yearly $100 billion Green Climate Fund. They want assurances that the money will not come from existing development funds. But the group also feels that the fund will still be short by trillions of dollars. The landmark Paris Agreement saw countries commit to limiting global warming to 2 degrees Celsius. But even if all countries act decisively now, there are still doubts as to whether that's achievable on current projections. And once again, the most vulnerable countries will be the hardest hit.
When you talk about global temperature, in order to get the full impact in Africa, you need to multiply by 1.5. So can you imagine 3.8 degrees multiplied by 1.5? So it's condemning them to sudden death. It's condemning them to hit the roads and migrate. And I think that the world has seen Syrian refugees. Wait until you see climate refugees.
That paints a depressing outlook, but it is hoped it will bring greater focus and action. Dan Williams, CCTV, Marrakech.
Well, it's very clear that expectations are rather high going into this last week of the COP22 conference. Peninah, coming back to you now, of course, there is hope that this will still live up to this idea of being a COP of action. In the coming days, what's expected to happen as the talks shift up a gear?
Well, Lindy, we're expecting a pretty intense week in this coming day starting Tuesday. We know over 70 heads of state and government will converge here. Of course, high government representatives as well will be here. Now, tomorrow morning at 9, we expect to hear from the UN Secretary General Ban Ki-moon. He will hold a press briefing, basically outlining the agenda in the coming days. Like you heard Dan Williams there mentioning in his package, there's obviously lots of concerns, especially from African countries here. Key among those concerns, of course, is the issue of financing. There are also questions being asked about the deadlines and how to make people commit to those deadlines. And of course, tomorrow people will be keen to know, is that going to form part of the agenda as these heads of states and governments meet here to formulate policies that clearly are going to be very key and instrumental to moving these goals into action, Lindy. So then after that, we do expect that these the world leaders basically will converge. They will hold discussions throughout the day. At 3 p.m. in the afternoon, we do expect the first official statement, basically outlining the outcomes of those discussions. So that's what we're keeping a keen eye on tomorrow and, of course, in the coming days, Lindy.
And, of course, we do look forward to touching base with you regularly in the days to come. Thanks very much. Peninah Karibe there live for us in Marrakech.